Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Cause you can, and you don't stop. Cause you can, and you don't stop. Oh, when you can, and you don't stop. I got the brand new future guaranteed.
Yes, yes, yes. It's that day of the week, that time of the night. Another special edition of Late Night Sports Radio. Welcome to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. I'm your host, Jim Sarantias of the FantasyGreek.com. Well, we've got another great show for you. In the first half, we'll be talking NFL Combine and draft prospects with CBS's very own Dane Brugler. And in the second half, we'll be talking NFL free agency and do our special segment on Rumorville, Where Could They Go, with TFG's Jim Wiedner and Ben Franklin. But before we get started, I am joined by our producer from 87sportsfans.com, the always gregarious and uber intelligent Keith Grieve. Keith, how's it going?
You always set the bar so high for me. I feel like gregarious. I've got to be over the top. Hey, I want to hear what happened today.
Well, I've decided that every show I'm gonna come up with new adjectives to describe you, if that's even remotely possible.
Just keep the number of syllables to a minimum. That's all I ask.
I'll try. If Steve were on the show, I had a slew for him too, but that's besides the point. Okay. To all our listeners out there, just a reminder, if you're listening live and you have any questions or comments whatsoever, feel free to give us a call at 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. Or tweet the Greek at hashtag AskTFG. That's hashtag AskTFG. And remember, there is no such thing as a stupid question on this show. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first guest of the evening. He's Dane Brugler, Senior NFL Draft Analyst for the NFLDraftScout.com and CBS Sports. You can follow Dane on Twitter at DP Brugler. That's Brugler. That's at DP Brugler. Dane, welcome to the show.
Jim, thanks for having me on.
Dane, this is a great time of the year. It's probably my most favorite time of the year up until the fantasy football draft season rolls around, and it's the NFL Combine and the NFL Draft. I mean, it's the one time to me that you actually get to play fantasy football for real.
Yeah, the NFL Draft is such an interesting process because it marries college football with the NFL, and so there's so many people involved. If you're a college football fan, you want to see where your favorite players are going in the professional ranks, and then if you're an NFL fan, you want to see the young talent who's going to help your team get better. And then obviously there's a large percentage of people that are fans of both. And so it just brings together a lot of different people, a lot of different intrigue. And then it also helps that there are no games going on right now in the NFL or football in general. And so we need something to talk about. And so NFL Draft really carries that flag for a few months here.
And I'll tell you, the NFL's doing their best to get people to be interested in football, even though there's nothing really going on, at least that outsiders would be interested, unlike insiders like the coaching staffs, the scouts, and obviously us media people. But we had the NFL Combine, and it's obviously an exciting time because some players really get to separate themselves from the crowd, and some players actually fall out of favor, while there's other players that actually say, hey, take a look at me. And so I want to ask you, as an NFL draft scout, for those who didn't stay glued to the TV to watch the Combine, who are a couple of players that were helped by the Combine?
I think the first name that really comes to mind is Vic Beasley out of Clemson, the athletic pass rusher. Weighed in at 246 pounds, which is, I think that was the biggest number that we were looking forward to when it came to Beasley, because I had a scout call me back in September who said he just left Clemson and he weighed in Vic Beasley at about 224 pounds. And so for a pass rusher at 224 pounds, that was a big red flag. Is he lean? Can he put on the weight? What's going on there? But he weighed in at 246 pounds at the Combine, which is a great number for him. 35 reps on the bench, which is a terrific number for him as well. But then, okay, he puts on the weight. What's his range of motion? Did he lose any of his athleticism, his speed, his quickness with the added bulk and the added weight? and he goes out and runs a 4.5 340 and 41-inch vertical, 10-head brawn jump, just outstanding numbers. And so Vic Beasley, really matched his workout with what you see on the tape, and that's a guy that can run circles around tackles. Now, there are questions about, once he gets locked up, can he shed, can he disengage? Doesn't have very long arms. But when you have that type of athleticism, you're going to move up. And so that's why I think there's a good chance we see Vic Beasley in the top 10. Another guy we'll see in the top 10 who helped himself at the Combine was Kevin White, the West Virginia wide receiver. Now, I don't think anyone expected him to be slow because on tape, he's running stride for stride with corners. But I don't think anyone expected a 4.35 40. So that was really impressive to see. Kevin's a guy that he can stack corners. And then once the ball's in the air, he's the best at attacking wide receiver in this draft. So when the ball's in the air, you feel really confident he's going to go up and get it, high point it, come down, finish the play. So Kevin White, he was already in that mix to be the first wide receiver off the board, and he only helped himself. And so I think Kevin White, he has a lot of momentum with teams to be that top wide receiver drafted, possibly even top 5. So it'll be interesting to see where Kevin White ends up. And then, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the quarterback. Jameis Winston, we rarely see the top quarterbacks throw at the Combine. Both Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston threw, and Jameis was near flawless. You saw the footwork. You saw the ball come off his hand. Looked really well, carried himself really well. And then during the interview process as well, I think that's really what people were most interested in. How would he present himself to teams? And, the word I got from, my league contacts is he was nothing but impressive. He comes off a little cocky and brash, but that's not the worst quality to have in your quarterback. I mean, he's the type of cocky that rallies the troops and has the utmost confidence in his teammates. And so it's not a bad thing to have. And so for a kid that just turned 21, a lot of things to like about Jameis, even though he does have the baggage, he held himself at the Combine.
That's really great to hear because, for most of us that have been out of school for a while and we see these young quarterbacks who show all this promise, sometimes when you hear him talk, you just kind of roll your eyes and go, you just kind of don't get it. But definitely from what I saw from Jameis and the parts of the Combine that I watched, it definitely looks like he does have his act together, and he'll likely be heading to that place called Tampa Bay come late April. That having been said, we know who's going to be the number one quarterback, and that's likely, we think it's going to be Jameis Winston, and it's a fair, educated guess. And then Marcus Mariota will likely be the number 2 guy. But there's several different quarterbacks that are sort of vying to be that third quarterback in this draft. And who do you see falling into that spot?
Yeah, that's going to be one of the storylines of draft weekend is who's that number 3 quarterback, and when does he come off the board? You look at the senior group of quarterbacks this year, it's not a very strong class. And there's a good chance that for the first time since 1994, we don't have a top 50 quarterback drafted. And so that would be a big, storyline to keep track of. For me, it's Brett Hundley, the UCLA quarterback. Now, the physical skills are all there. He looks the part, he's athletic, he can move, and then the arm strength is NFL quality. But there are just questions about his vision. What is he seeing out there? His pocket presence is a mess. He drops his eye level at the surest sign of pressure and doesn't maneuver in the pocket the way you need to. There's just a lot of things about Hundley mentally and with his natural traits that you worry about. And you think maybe he can get better, but how long is it going to take? When will he be able to actually get on the field? And so for those reasons, I think we'll see Brett Hundley slip a little bit. I don't think he's going to go in the top 10 like many thought at the beginning of the season, but I could see him coming off the board in the top 10 of the second round for one of these quarterback desperate teams who fall in love with the tools and think, okay, we'll give him a year, we can develop him, and so I think somewhere in between picks 25 and 50, we'll see Brett Hundley come off the board, and then if it's not Brett Hundley, Bryce Petty, Garrett Grayson, the 2 top seniors, are kind of vying to be that top senior off the board. Bryce Petty coming from Baylor's system, he basically has to relearn the quarterback position. And then Garrett Grayson, a guy who, you like what you see, but he's good, he's adequate in a lot of areas, but he's not great in any one area. You just really question can he start for you in the NFL? the different teams seem to be split on that. And so Garrett Grayson, more of a mid-round type of target. So, but nonetheless, quarterback boards after the top two, they're going to be all over the place for every single team. And so, if you talk to one team, it'd be Brett Hundley. You talk to another, it'd be Garrett Grayson. You talk to another one, it might be someone we haven't even discussed.
Yeah.
So, it'll really be all over the board.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, it was Bryce Petty and Garrett Grayson had really solid Senior Bowl games. In fact, there were several players that did. But before we head off in a different direction with players, real quick as to the Combine, was there one or two players that you thought actually hurt themselves from their Combine performance?
Yeah, there always are players that perform under what you expect.
Under expectations.
Exactly. And so I think, a few guys that stood out, Florida State, a couple guards that, I think received high grades. A lot of people think top 100 type of guys. But Trey Jackson, who's the right guard, and then Mateus on the left side, the left guard, both of them were very underwhelming. And you don't expect big numbers from guards, but they both ran, I think one was 5.52, Mateus, who I think was a 5.52 as well. The verticals were 17.5. I mean, that type of vertical, it shows lower body explosion, and it's such a low vertical is really a red flag. So I think Trey Jackson and Mateus, the two guards out of Florida State, definitely didn't help their draft grades.
This year's running back class is pretty stacked. I think you would agree. And,
Absolutely.
And nothing more could show that than the Senior Bowl game. There were several different guys that were featured backs there. I even want to say it was Amir
Abdullah. Yep.
Amir Abdullah, who was the most valuable player of the game. Do you think that that sort of mentality, being out there in the league, in part explains why the Philadelphia Eagles traded away LaShawn McCoy yesterday?
I think that's definitely part of it. You look at LaShawn McCoy, obviously the salary was a big part of it. And what his value is now is probably the highest it's going to be in terms of trade value moving forward. And so,
for sure,
I get why they made the move. And I think this draft class is a big part of it as well, because it's the running back class this year is one of the strongest in this class this year. We're going to have 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range, running backs in the top 100. We have a lot of guys that you could make a case for in the first round. Todd Gurley being the top guy. He's the best running back in this class. It's not even close. The question just becomes, how early do you take a chance on a guy who is recovering from ACL surgery, towards ACL in November? How early do you take Todd Gurley? I still think he goes first round. Melvin Gordon will get some first round consideration. Jay Ajayi from Boise State in that late first, early second round. But like I said, even if you don't get one of those running backs early, you can still find a solid contributor in the second, third, fourth round. Guys like David Cobb out of Minnesota, who was at the Senior Bowl, Buck Allen, USC, David Johnson, Northern Iowa. I can go on and on with these running backs in this class. It's really a terrific class. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think we're going to see a run of those running backs in the second round somewhere, and they'll start flying off the board. But the running back position itself hasn't been devalued. I mean, if you watch an NFL game, obviously teams are still utilizing the running back, even more so out of the backfield as a receiver. But the running back position in terms of draft value has been devalued because teams know, we can find a guy later on or even the second or third round. They could be an impact player. So no question that goes into the mindset. I think Chip Kelly has his eye on one of these running backs, Amir Abdullah, Jay Ajayi, the two running backs that immediately stuck out to me that maybe the Eagles could target in the second or third round.
Last season, we saw 4 rookies break the 1,000-yard mark in receiving. Do you think we see that again in 2015?
That's tough. Wide receiver is usually one of the toughest positions for these prospects, these rookies to transition in the NFL. A part of that is in college they don't have to deal with press coverage. They don't run full route trees. They're getting used to the speed of the game. Corners in the NFL are so much better than corners they face in college. So we usually see more of a transition period. But last year, yeah, that wide receiver class is unbelievable. And this wide receiver class isn't too shabby. It's not as good as last year, but it's a notch below. We mentioned Kevin White earlier out of West Virginia, Amari Cooper, Devontae Parker. Those three guys are vying to be that first receiver off the board somewhere in the top 10. But all three are going to come off the board somewhere in the top 15. We could see 2 or 3 more guys in the first round. Dorial Green-Beckham out of Oklahoma, Rashad Perriman, UCF, Jalen Strong, Arizona State. And then if you don't get your guy in the first round, there's several options in the second, third, fourth. Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Green, Devin Funchess. Similar to the running backs, I could really go on and on with these guys that depending on what you need, there's a fit for you somewhere in almost every round. And so I think that's the biggest reason maybe not to take a receiver early is, you can wait and get maybe just a lesser prospect, but there's not that big of a jump to the next tier of wide receiver talent in the second or third round. So it's a very deep class, and if you need a wide receiver, this is the draft to need one.
If I'm the owner of a team and you're the general manager, who would you say is the number one wide receiver in this draft?
To me, it's Amari Cooper out of Alabama, and that's he's right there with Kevin White on my board, my personal draft board of all positions. My first one that was in January, Amari Cooper was number 5 overall. Kevin White was number 6. So I have them very closely rated. But to me, Amari Cooper just gets that edge because he knows how to get open, and he's a game breaker. What he did in the SEC this year was tremendous. Now, obviously, they really worked to get him the ball, force-feeding it to him at times. But like I said, he knows how to get open, and then once he has the ball, he can create. And so he can do a little bit of everything. He's the most polished receiver in this class. So it wouldn't shock me at all if we're talking, 8 months from now, we're talking about Amari Cooper as having the best rookie season of this receiving class.
It also strikes me that he may very well be the best route runner in this class.
Absolutely, and that's part of being the most polished is, he really is the best route runner, and not only running a full route tree at Alabama, but knowing how to get open, the quickness out of his breaks. He knows how to play defenders, and he works at it. And that's not just a natural thing. He's really worked at it. He watches film. He knows what defenders are susceptible doing, whether it's a head fake, whether sinking his hips and exploding, whatever he needs to do, he can do it. And so, well-mannered kid who's really a hard worker, has a great reputation. So, yeah, that definitely goes all into his evaluation and why I really think he'll be that top receiver from this class. But like I said, I think Kevin White's right there neck and neck. I have him just behind Cooper.
I know analysts haven't been too high or too excited about some of the depth in the linebacker group. In fact, it seems to be a group that potentially it's just not – it's not as stacked as the edge rushers that we're seeing coming into this year's draft. Do you see some teams drafting defensive ends like Mizzou's Shane Ray or Florida State's Mario Edwards or Utah's Nate Orchard? And I picked those specifically given what I'll describe as being a little bit smaller in stature in terms of their height and making them linebackers in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's it's something that we've seen. It's been a trend in recent years. We're seeing more and more of it. Instead of these pass rushers not fitting what teams do, they're finding ways to use them. And for a lot of these guys, it means playing off the ball in space. And so you have to learn how to, drop. You have to learn how to play, with spatial awareness. And it's something for a lot of these guys, they're fishes out of water. It's something they're not used to. They're used to getting upfield. But those guys you mentioned, I think for a lot of them, that might be what they have to do. Now, Shane Ray, to me, he's a defensive end. I know he's shorter and he's not the biggest guy, but I think he has the best first step. And when you do see him in space, I'm not sure he has the hips to, properly do what you need to do for him to drop and do all those things. And so Shane Ray, to me, is a guy that's going to go off the board somewhere top 15. But to me, I want his hand on the ground, and I want him up the field with that first quickness that he has. Nate Orchard, he's in that, we say that, the tweener, the hybrid pass rusher, guys that can, get up the field, but they won't be able to do it consistently. You might need them to drop. Kikaha, the pass rusher from Washington, in that similar mold. it's almost like we need a new position for these guys. They're not defensive ends. They're not linebackers off the ball. They're more just edge guys that you can do either, that you want them doing different things. But for, like I said, for a lot of these guys, it's a transition because they weren't asked to do them in college, and so we talk about quarterbacks, asking them to do different things once they get to the NFL level. It's the same type of thing with these edge rushers. They're going to be asked to do more than just simply pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. So I think those names you mentioned definitely in consideration to play a different position in the NFL.
Dane, I'm the owner of a football team. You're my general manager. We don't need a quarterback. We have a great quarterback on our team, but we've got a high draft pick. And who's the number one overall pick that's not a quarterback, in your view?
I would, two guys I would consider. That's Leonard Williams, defensive tackle out of USC, and then Dante Fowler, the pass rusher out of Florida. Leonard Williams is he's a man-child. He's outstanding. He can get his hands on you, and then he knows what to do. He can toss you around. His production doesn't look pretty, but he's a good player. He has the skill set that you want. He, in my opinion, is the best player in this draft. And then I think Dante Fowler deserves a mention. That relentless energy that he brings, the get-off quickness. He can't figure out how to get to the quarterback. He'll find a way. He just has that mentality. And those types of players I always have room for on my football team. So Leonard Williams, the best player in this draft. Dante Fowler, though, he's right below him. To me, the best three players, Leonard Williams, Jameis Winston, Dante Fowler.
Dan, that's great. Listen, before we get to the break, I've got one last question. And it's a question I asked because the last couple of years in doing some of these mock drafts with some of these scout types, they love to draft players a lot earlier than they need to, but it's because they see so much value in players no one's really talking about. So to me, that reeks of a sleeper. If there's one guy that no one's really talking about right now that should be drafted in the latter rounds that a year from now we'll be saying, what a great draft pick that was in round 5, 6, 7, however you define sleeper, who would that one guy be?
I think Zach Hodges out of Harvard, an Ivy Leaguer, could be that guy. He's a great kid. I had a chance to talk to him a few times over the last few months. At Harvard, he played everything from outside linebacker to defensive end. They even moved him inside a nose tackle at times. He was kind of a do-everything type of guy. He was at the Senior Bowl. I was really happy for him that he got that chance. But he's not going to go high, but I like his chances in the mid to late rounds. Bring him in, develop him, and I think we haven't heard the last of Zach Hodges out of Harvard.
That kid out of Hobart also seems like he's pretty good too, but I don't think he's catching anyone.
He's top 100. He's outstanding. He definitely opened eyes for sure.
Well, listen, Dane, thank you so much for joining us today to talk NFL Combine and NFL Draft. For all our listeners out there, that's Dane Brugler. He's a senior NFL draft analyst for NFLDraftScout.com and CBS Sports. You can follow Dane on Twitter at DP Brugler. That's Brugler. That's at DP Brugler, DPBRUGLR. Dane, thanks again. And Keith, take us to break.
Who
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. That's some Bon Jovi, courtesy of Mr. Keith Grieve. I'm not sure what Keith's thinking, but apparently he thinks this is the kind of music us football fans need to be hearing. Okay, thanks, Keith.
It was because it was more saying, how many teams out there are living on a prayer right now?
There's probably several, and there's probably several that we're gonna be talking about in just a minute. For all the listeners out there, I'm Jim Sarantias of the FantasyGreek.com, and that's Keith Grieve of 87 Sports Fans. We just had a half hour of NFL Draft Prospect Talk with Dan Bugler of CBS Sports, and you know what? We're not done yet for the evening. Basically, we've got 6 days to go until free agency opens, and there's a lot of work to be done. So to get us through the next, 22 minutes, we're joined by the FantasyGreek.com's Jim Widener, who covers the Packers, Vikings, and college football prospects. And now to be outdone, Ben Franklin, who covers the Cowboys for the FantasyGreek.com. Welcome, guys. How's it going?
Going well.
Thanks for having us.
Guys, I'm glad you could join me. So much has happened in the last 48 hours. Yesterday, when we did the 87 Sports Fans show, we spent a good chunk of the show talking about LaShawn McCoy, or the trade, LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso between the Eagles and the Bills, and that certainly was a bit of a stunner, at least I thought, yesterday. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Ben.
All right. Well, I was certainly shocked. I heard about it coming home on the radio, and really, it just seems like a one-sided deal. I mean, the Bills, they got a steal just trading player for player. I mean, Kiko Alonso, I think he had something like 139 tackles the year before he got hurt. But, I mean, he spent the entire last year out, and they just traded for a player was the rushing leader 2 years ago. So I think the Bills got away with the steal here.
Wow. Jim, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think this all comes down to Chip Kelly molding that team into a system and not about one individual player. I think that it was more about let's get the system that makes a player, and they thought they could get value with trading McCoy and saving some money. And now that Kelly, it sounds like Kelly's controlling the personnel now, and I think that's what it came down to. And you know, it sounds like he played college at Oregon. Kelly's bringing in people who know his system and buy into it, and that's what he's going to go moving forward. Again, that like we talked last week, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded up to get Mariota either. So I think this is just really laying the foundation for what Kelly wants and having players buy into his system and know his system.
Now, see, Ben, I found what you said interesting because I actually thought the Eagles made out in this trade as opposed to the Bills. And the reason why I say that is in part what we discussed about in the first half hour of the show, and in part sort of, you know, you've got an offensive player like LaShawn McCoy who's 27, but Kiko Alonso is like 23, 24. He's got at least another 10 years ahead of him. He was very productive his rookie season, and despite missing last year, he should still be productive, and he should be making plays all over the field where LaShawn McCoy only has 2 years left. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I had sort of a slightly different perspective as to what had happened. So let me add to you guys today. The Bills end up drafting and getting Matt Castle. What can this all say about these Bills? Do you like what they're doing? Do you like the fact that they've decided to sort of get off the sidelines and be real aggressive in getting players onto their team that they think will help them win?
Well, I do. I mean, I think that the trade did make sense for both teams. I mean, now it's not to devalue Kiko Alonso. He's definitely got a bright future ahead of him. But if you look at what the Bills had last year, they had an incredible defense without him. I think they were ranked number 4 in the league, and they didn't have him. So I think they see it as, well, we're good on defense for now. We need a running back who can stay healthy, and that is LaShawn McCoy for the foreseeable next 2 years, which I believe they think is their window. I mean, they just got Sammy Watkins last year, or that he kind of started to break out last year. I know EJ Manuel and Kyle Orton kind of played a game there, so not sure what they'll do with that. But I mean, their window is opening, and they're trying to jump on it.
Jim?
I think, with the move with Matt Castle, I think it just proves that they don't have much faith in EJ Manuel right now. And they can't, Rex Ryan, he just can't suffer through what he suffered when he was with the Jets, with Vic and Geno Smith and Sanchez. So I just think that he's looking to protect himself and can't go through another year with the feet position. And, I think Castle, I watched him play when he was up here in Minnesota, and he, until he got hurt last year, I thought he was a reliable, good veteran quarterback, kind of a Kyle Orton mold type that will come in and probably won't win you games, but won't lose you games like Rex Ryan suffered when he had a duo of Vic and Geno Smith. So I think right now they're setting themselves up to make a run, and I wouldn't doubt at all that EJ Manuel isn't the starter this is if he's, he would miss most of last year with an injury. So I think Ryan just doesn't want to leave himself short, so he's protecting himself. And McCoy, he's showing that too, that, run at the AFC East, and the only way to do that is to bring in some players offensively. Defensively, Rex Ryan can coach defenses. That's never been his problem. His problem has been on the offensive side of the ball, and now he's got Greg Roman running his offense in Buffalo, and I think that I think they should have a pretty decent team this year.
Let me ask you guys some questions specific questions about the teams that both of you cover. And for Jim, it seems that the decision to cut AJ Hawk made sense, but would it be fair to say you were surprised?
No, not really. I think that I think this, after watching Hawk play for 9 seasons for the Packers, being drafted number 5 overall in 2006, and just not living up to the potential that they expected out of him. When they drafted him they expected him to be like Clay Matthews has been for them. And he just has never been the playmaker. He became they always said he was a great communicator, even when they had bad defenses. And I wasn't shocked that they made the move. Once they released Brad Jones the week before, I think that, unless AJ Hawk was going to take a pay cut, I didn't see him coming back. I thought maybe as a backup, but once they cut a player, and they did the same thing with Charles Woodson a couple years ago, once they cut him loose, they don't come back. It's not, down the road they'll re-sign him. And I think with Hawk, they just saw a player that doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the playmaking ability that they need at the inside linebacker position, so they just moved on.
If the Packers can't sign David Harris in free agency, how would you feel about Rolando McClain?
Rolando McClain had a resurrection down in Dallas. I thought he played. Ben can talk about this a little more, how he played for them. I just think the past issues that he had in Oakland and going back home to Alabama, being arrested. I think the mugshot, if you Google image it, is with a big smile on his face when he's getting cuffed. It kind of stands out in my head. But and then he retired for a while when he was signed by the Ravens. There's a lot of risk by signing him. You don't know back into that situation. He played really well for him when he was healthy last year with Dallas, but with the way Ted Thompson runs his team, I don't see him, unless he can find somebody who's a special player like Charles Woodson, Julius Peppers. I just don't see him dipping into that free agency unless he can get a playmaker on that team. And I just don't see it happening.
This next question I'd like to direct to both you guys, and that's the Packers passed on franchising Randall Cobb. Do you think they made a mistake? Ben, you go first.
Yes and no. I mean, Randall Cobb is a fantastic receiver. He's proven that the past 2 years, and he's only 25, which I didn't know until today. So he's still got a long career ahead of him. That being said, it's a pretty diverse market right now. The free agency is going to be really interesting with the amount of names that are out there. I mean, just looking at the top 5, I mean, you got Jeremy Maclin, Torrey Smith, Michael Crabtree, Kenny Britt, Cecil Shorts. All these names are out there. And they all have similar potential as Randall Cobb. So I think the Packers are kind of just gambling with it and saying if we can get him back, sure. But if not, there are other options out there.
Jim?
Kind of a two-part answer. No, I don't think they made a mistake by not using the franchise tag. I think $12 million for a slot receiver is pretty excessive. I think they failed miserably on the fact of re-signing him during the season. I think that was – I know he came off an injury. He was hurt. He broke his lower leg against Baltimore the season before, and they wanted to make sure he was healthy. But I think Thompson failed at re-signing him midway through the year last year. If he could have done that, that would have been the biggest thing, not having him go to the market. Now, right now, the biggest time is in the next week. I think it's on Saturday that it's the non-tampering by the agents can start looking around without having their players sign a contract. And I think with Cobb, he's going to see a lot of money thrown his way. You keep hearing Oakland, Jacksonville. And, if he hits the open market, I don't know. I think there's probably – I would have said before this all went down or at the end of the season, that it was about a 95% chance he'd come back. Now I'm giving it probably about a 50% chance. And I don't think – I got no problem with not using the franchise tag because of the $12.83 million that you give him. I just had a problem that they didn't re-sign him during the season last year.
So let me ask you this, sort of the same thing I asked Ben, which is, do you think well, I didn't ask it exactly this way, but Ben, it seemed you suggested that he is replaceable based on the names that are out there in free agency. Jim, do you agree with that? Do you think one of the other free agents could replace Randall Cobb?
Well, it's a possibility, but Thompson...
Maybe Jeremy Maclin? Maybe Maclin?
Well, especially with wide receivers, Thompson is really good at drafting wide receivers. And then you have the wild card. Arguably the best quarterback in the game right now is Rodgers. So can Rodgers make somebody else that's on that roster, Jared Abbrederis, Jeff Janis, Devontae Adams seeing a bigger part of the offensive game plan, can he make them into not the same type of receiver Cobb is, the production, but close to it. I think that I think there's a chance that Thompson will either go with what he's got on the roster or he'll look in the draft and grab somebody to replace Cobb.
Guys, you're both probably pretty happy that the Lions didn't franchise Sue, I would think. I was shocked that they did not franchise him. I mean, I think franchising a player of his caliber for a little over $11 million is the right thing, not the wrong thing to do. But now that he's going to be in free agency, what do you think about Ndamukong Suh coming to your respective teams?
Well, I guess I'll start out. If for the way the Packers run their organization and their personnel, he's the type of player that they'd actually take a look at because he's a field tilter. He's an interesting player. He's got some personality issues, but he can play football. Now, if he came to Green Bay, it would help that defense tremendously. But then you have to look at hindsight. Most likely you'd lose Cobb and probably Brian Bulaga you probably couldn't afford to sign. And then you would probably, there's a chance, Tramon Williams is a free agent at cornerback, and so is Devon House. So could you sign either or one of them after signing Sue? I mean, it's an interesting thing. You'd have to gauge what what you're going to gain and what you're going to lose. And that would be the one player I think Thompson would actually look at to bring in. And he'd be a huge asset to their defense.
And before we take a quick break, Ben, what do you think? Ndamukong Suh, how would he look in a Dallas Cowboys uniform?
I can't say I wouldn't enjoy seeing the star on his helmet, but I just don't think he's a freak athlete. He definitely has the ability to change a defense, and that's exactly what the Cowboys need. But the Cowboys have other priorities that they need to get figured out first. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest free agent years they've had in a long time, and just re-signing some of the stars they currently have and need to re-sign, a.k.a. Dez and DeMarco, and a few of the other pressing needs, such as the cornerbacks and that kind of thing. They just don't have the cap space or the money that he's going to warrant. I mean, I read something earlier today that says he's looking at a long-term deal with I think the Colts or the Dolphins were the top two suitors, and he's going to make something like $60 million guaranteed, and that's just it's too big of a contract. Jerry Jones isn't looking to give that kind of money out, as he's shown with franchise tagging Dez, and while I would love to see him and he would definitely make the defense better, I just don't see it as a smart financial decision for the Cowboys.
Well, guys, that gets us to our break. When we come back, we'll do a little bit of NFL Rumorville. You are listening to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour on Late Night Sports Radio.
Second to keep breathing in a moment before it's gone. You never know when others lost until you find just what it costs to be wrong. I wonder if you think of me passing by, you think you see me coming. I wonder if you pull me in, kiss me just one time again. Coming and the nights will keep on going till they're tired, falling fast asleep and as they dream of ghosts of beats filled with desire. The chance of life is all around, a chance to take is always found. Writing on the lullabies, on the lonely living life. Remember
the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
And there we go. We're back from break. Welcome back to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. This is your host, Jim Sarantias of the FantasyGreek.com, and as usual, joined by Keith Grieve of 87 Sports Fans. Well, we're into the home stretch of tonight's show, and we're going to finish it off with a little bit of NFL rumorville, rumor mill, whatever you care to characterize it as. Basically, I've looked at some of the headlines from today, and I'm going to run it by Jim Widener, who covers the Packers and the Vikings and college prospects for the FantasyGreek.com, as well as Ben Franklin, who covers the Dallas Cowboys for the FantasyGreek.com, and see what you guys think. So my first rumor mill was today there was talk of Randall Cobb going to the Raiders. What do you think? Would that be a good fit? Does it make sense for everybody involved?
I think it's if Oakland offers over a year, I think he goes there. I think it would be a huge get by Reggie McKenzie, the general manager of the Raiders, and gives Derek Carr another weapon that he'll need. Cobb will join up with James Jones, a former Packer who's already out there. I think it makes sense, and I think if the dollar amount, I think if it's over 10 a year, I think he'll go.
Ben.
Yeah, I mean, they have a pretty good up-and-coming young team, and I think Randall Cobb fits into that mold well. I mean, with Derek Carr, they got, I think, Andre Holmes, and I think is going to be a stud tight end, Michael Rivera. I think he fits in pretty well. He's a little bit older than some of them, and he's got some experience, especially coming from Aaron Rodgers, that I'm sure could translate well to the young Raiders, and I think he could fit pretty well there, and I'm sure he'd like the better California weather than up there in Green Bay.
Hey, Ben, I'd like the better California weather. What are you talking about? All right. Well, it sounds like we would all agree on Randall Cobb to the Raiders, that there's their potential fit there. Certainly they've got the young quarterback, Derek Carr, going in his sophomore season. Randall Cobb could come in and be just another weapon for him, and it should help out the Raiders offense. At least that sounds like what we're all agreeing to. Another rumor that sort of came out today was, or a story that came out today was, that the Eagles were interested in Mark Ingram as their running back, which I thought was, for me, a little bit surprising, but I wanted to know what you guys thought.
I don't see the fit, but that's just me. I don't know if he fits into that type of scheme that Chip Kelly's running. To me, I think a place maybe Detroit or even Miami might be a place he might land.
I don't actually know that he's going to leave. I mean, the Saints just released Pierre Thomas. It kind of makes me wonder if they're going to make a pushback for Ingram, because he did a lot more last year than they thought he would, and I think he stays with the Saints. But I don't think he fits in the Eagles system. It's a very much more fast-paced offense. I mean, they still have Darren Sproles, who's the speed, so they need somebody who's kind of more of a bruiser, which Ingram is. But I don't think he leaves.
Interestingly, the Saints are roughly $30 million over the cap, even after having released Pierre Thomas today.
Wow.
They're in the worst shape of any team out there. I'm already predicting that Marcus Colson will be cut, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of their premier players isn't dumped just because of how much salary that they're carrying around. Let's say like a Jahari Evans or even Junior Gillette. So
anything that was on defense just cripples them.
It pretty much does, and it's hard to believe. I don't know how a team could be running for these years and not sort of see that, hey, did you know in a couple of years we're going to be $30 million over the cap? Just amazing. Anyway, one of the other stories that came out today, and I found this extremely interesting, and it almost sounded like maybe this is just people talking and not really necessarily true, but all right, it's a rumor, is that the NFC West, meaning the Cardinals, 49ers, Rams, and Seahawks, will all go after Darnell Dockett for next season. So my question to you guys is, if he can pick what team to go back to or go to, what team should Darnell Dockett go to? Or should he pick? Sorry, guys.
Well, it'll be interesting to, I'd like to see him head up to Seattle, stay in the division, and depends on how, being cut loose by Arizona, if he's bitter about that or not, or if the door was open for him to come back. Now, if he still has decent feelings with the Cardinals, I mean, most likely he'll head back, but I don't know. Seattle would probably be a good fit. They have Kevin Williams up there, who's not getting any younger. I think Dockett is still younger than him. And no, that would be an interesting fit. I would say Seattle.
I'd say he still stays in the division. I think he goes to the 49ers like he was meeting with today. They underperformed a little bit last year, and I think they could use that veteran presence because I think he's in his 30s, so they could use that veteran presence on their defense, get it back to the elite presence that it was like a year or two ago. So I think he goes 49ers.
See, I think he stays with the Cardinals, if only because at the end of the day it's a job, and why go through the hassle of selling the house? I mean, it's as simple as that. If all these teams end up putting up some money and the Cardinals just say, hey, we'll match the highest bidder or we'll give you an extra $500,000, I think he just stays where he is and just keep rolling with it. But
I'm guessing he's got enough money to get a second house.
That's true.
Thanks, Jim, for making it real for me.
Just might throw that out there. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Another rumor mill today was C.J. Spiller, that the Cardinals, Jets, Dolphins, and 49ers are all showing an interest. I thought the 49ers was interesting. So, guys, what do you think? If those are four teams that C.J. Spiller, if these teams were all saying, C.J., come join us, and you're his agent, who do you think C.J. should seriously consider?
I'm going to stick with what we talked about last week. I still see him ending up in Detroit. I think he'd be a perfect replacement for Reggie Bush. But if I had to pick out of those four teams, I see the Jets overpaying. I know it's he stays in New York and I think he'd be a legitimate. I mean, they probably overspend, but I think he would help out their team tremendously. So I would go first choice to second. I would go to the Jets.
Ben?
Sorry about that. I don't think the Jets need him just because I think they like what they found in I think it was Chris Ivory last year. And, the health issues that he's had, I don't see anyone overpaying for him. So I do agree that Detroit is a good fit because he does kind of fill the Reggie Bush gap in the speed and the injury way. But if I had to pick, I'd probably pick Lions. I don't think the Jets will overpay for him. One, on the value of the running back, and two, just the fact that he hasn't been able really to stay healthy.
Out of the group of teams, I like the Cardinals, if only because they definitely need a second running back. And I also like the Dolphins for that same reason. I mean, putting C.J. Spiller with Lamar Miller would keep it sort of similar to how it was in Buffalo. But the 49ers, I even found it a bit surprising they were one of the teams listed, if only because I think they're all set at running back. They don't need another running back, if anything. But it'll be interesting because, C.J. Spiller for some people is one of the top two running backs available. I don't agree with that assessment, but so be it. Another question I had for you guys is the Steelers, they want Troy Polamalu to retire. At least that's sort of the story that's being thrown out there. Do you think the Steelers end up cutting him because he won't retire?
He should retire. It's sad because I don't know when or even if he's ever played a full season. Hard to say with these guys. You know, you can't force them to make that decision, and it's their live they've known for many, many years. I think that they end up cutting him. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. They've made it very obvious that he's not in their plans for the future. They've even said it like straight up, we're not looking forward for him in 2015. So, and I don't think he's done yet. I think he still has a year or two left. Maybe if it's just a teaching role to young guys, not playing as much, but he's lost a step or two and he can't stay healthy. But I still think he's got a year mentally, maybe two, before he finally retires. I mean, he's only 33. I know that's older, but I think he still has a couple of years left, but not with the Steelers.
The Pittsburgh organization is starting to kind of phase out of that, you know, starting to let some of their older players go. And I know they brought James Harrison back last year, but Ike Taylor, I don't see him returning. Kind of forced Dick LeBeau out, the defensive coordinator. And I think Tomlin's kind of, you know, when he took over, he kind of was pretty set with the coaching staff he had and the personnel. And now I think he's starting to kind of put his own fingerprints on this organization. So I think that they're going to ways with some of these older guys and just moving forward in a different direction.
Keith, how are we doing on time? I got it is about a minute left.
Minute 20 to be exact.
Okay, guys, before we end the show, we were talking off the air about Ndamukong Suh and the rumor mill that two of the teams that would be interested in his services were the Indianapolis Colts and the Dolphins. We talked for 3 minutes about it, so now you've got under a minute, each of you under 30 seconds. Tell us, who do you think Suh goes with if these were the two teams he had to pick from? Dolphins, Indianapolis Colts.
Colts. I'll go with Colts out of those two teams.
Ben.
I think Colts, they are closer to winning the Super Bowl. He wants to win now. That's who he picks.
And guys, I have to agree with you. I think it's the best fit, and they've got the money too. Keith, you want to throw something in before I close it out?
No, go ahead. You're out of time.
All right. I'd like to thank my guests for the back half of the show, Jim Widener and Ben Franklin. For Keith Grieve and Steve Taylor of 87 Sports Fans, I'm Jim Sarantias of thefantasygreek.com. You've been listening to thefantasygreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. Catches every Wednesday night from 10 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And to all of our listeners, no matter what they say, you're the best. Good night, good night, good night.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.